Good afternoon. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email Marketing. My guest today, I hope you're watching, not just listening, but glad if you're listening as well. Pierre Lipton, co-founder, COO of 1440 Media. Pierre, welcome.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Forbes 30 under 30. Congratulations. That happened, what, a few months back?
Yeah, in December.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that.
Did you know that was coming?
No, they really hide it from you. They do a good job of surprising you. So I actually went on a run the morning. I think it was December 1st. I went on a run that morning. Got back at 7 o'clock. Checked my phone, and things were exploding. So it's pretty cool.
That's a pleasant surprise. I gotta bet, right?
Oh yeah, big time.
Take us through the sort of short history of 1440 Media. Launched when you hit your 1 million mark a while back. I did read that.
Awesome. Yeah. So let me think. It's crazy just looking back at how quickly things have moved, and simultaneously how long it feels. So I gotta give a hat tip to my co-founders, Drew and Tim. They were kind of the masterminds behind the idea. And I was very eager to join, but it was definitely not my idea. But about 4.5 years ago, I think it was September of 2017, they were busy professionals, as was I, and we were out in the world trying to consume the news, trying to just know what was happening. We were going from TMZ for culture news to ESPN for sports to Wall Street Journal for business, Reuters for politics. It was just really like exhausting exercise that we felt the busy person didn't have any time for, and just like we didn't know how people were like fitting that kind of comprehensive news diet into their days. So that kind of paired with the growing polarization of the news, threats to democracy that we felt have two people on opposite sides of the political spectrum were having their opinions informed by their media diets, really encouraged us to create something that was built for this frustrated news consumer. So we started writing a daily email newsletter. It was actually an email thread, like a threaded chain. We didn't even use any tech at the beginning. And we sent it to 78 friends and family, just summarizing sports, entertainment, and culture, science and technology, business and markets, and politics and world affairs.
Okay.
And through the kindness of our first readers and early adopters and just everyone kind of in between, we were able to grow really quickly, maintain really strong engagement rates, improve the product massively because it needed to improve over time. And then we passed 1,000, passed 5,000, 100,000. And then in September, I believe, of this past year of 2021, we hit 1 million subscribers, and we keep growing. So we're at just shy of 1.4 million as of today, and really trying to hit that 2 and then 10 million mark.
That is the proverbial hockey stick that I think investors call it. Well, I mean, it's terrific. I don't mean this to be a sort of a pin you question, but you're in the Forbes 30 under 30, and not everybody's convinced that people under 30 and email are a natural marriage. And here you are in an email-based channel. How come?
Yeah, it's especially today, I feel like there's a lot of thinking around the email space as this like fairly archaic, if you will, industry. And I look back at some data, and mind you, I think 82% of stats are made up on the spot, but I think 70 to 75%. I want to say it's 72, but don't hold me to that. I want to say 72% of Americans, the first app they open every day is their email app. So you can build your own app. You can be a text-based delivery platform. You can operate through Facebook. But if we're talking about a platform that's tried and true, that's consistent, and that delivers to the lion's share of Americans, I think email is the place to be.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I think for obvious reasons I would agree with you on a bunch of fronts. And this does come up. I've had this come up with multiple guests in the time I've had the opportunity to talk with people about it. It's not a channel. You mentioned Facebook. It's not a channel where it's someone else's audience you're paying for or borrowing, or that really can take it away from you.
Right.
Right. If you lose a subscriber, you lose them because they decided not to get it anymore. Right.
Yeah. You have this direct line of communication with everyone, which has I mean, it has its implications on unsubscribes, but it
Yes.
also, and yeah, that risk of losing communication. And I think that there are still some platform risks. Facebook has immense platform risks, to your point. Like if the algorithm decides to turn you off for the XYZ user, you're never going to communicate with them again.
Hmm.
With email, you can get in trouble with certain inboxes, like
Sure.
your domain can get in trouble. But if you keep a really strong reputation, which we've tried to do from day one,
Yeah.
it's really it's just an unsubscribe that can stop you
Yeah.
from engaging with the reader. So
Yeah. Which
uh,
is engaging with one reader,
one reader,
not a
yeah,
thousand of them.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 There are a lot of merits, and we do seem to be at a point in the last couple of years of some rediscovery of the merits. Sorry, channels going off here. You know the drill, right?
endless news cycle, yeah.
Mute, mute. I thought I did. Talk to you later, hon. Uh, what email's getting sort of rediscovered slash reinvented. You guys, Substack, Morning Brew, right? Like oh, this is viable. This has a bunch of advantages that, as you said about, no one can take it away from you and so on. Like that's good. Did you think going in 2017 or so, like how meticulous was that versus, I mean, honestly, and I mean this as a compliment. One of the merits is the off the shelf tool set is, oh, look, I've got an email client. I can mail 78 people, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to make us sound like we were too much driven by altruism, but in a sense, our initial goal was just like, how do we as quickly, as efficiently as possible,
Yeah.
and with as few barriers to entry, let's be
Yeah.
real,
Yeah.
how do we reach these people? And email it felt very natural. We didn't have to use MailChimp, though we eventually moved on to MailChimp and then tried our hand with a bunch of different ESPs. But we started just within our email client, and it was incredibly easy. We weren't thinking necessarily about scalability, but I mean, when you hit 1.4 million subscribers, you realize like, wow, scalability is a huge perk of the email space.
It's true. That's a really good point. Yeah.
That at the time, it was really just like, how do we do this as quickly as possible in a way that isn't going to cost a huge amount of money?
Yeah.
Or we're just like, making an app is so difficult, and it's getting easier every day, but it's still it's quite a task. And we felt like the easiest way we could get something in front of our friends and our readers that would actually impact and help their lives was via email. And
Yeah.
I stand by that decision.
Hey, yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. In a funny way, the story you just told is a great example for entrepreneurs out there. That's a great example of I hate to use the initials MVP, right? Like,
Mhm.
boom, we wrote it in email client on the desktop and hit send. You didn't spend bazillion hours hiring ESPs or building an app or any of that crap. It's like get it in front of people. Do they like the hot dog in the bun or not?
Yeah, exactly. And even like even the step beyond that, like we started with this true MVP
Mhm.
of writing this email. I mean, $0 were what
Yeah,
was spent there.
yeah,
And lots of time
yeah.
kind of fine tuning what this would look like, and then scouring the internet for the best links. But at its core, $0 were spent. And then even like in the months that followed, it was really just like we chose MailChimp as our first ESP. I think
Right,
it was $12 a month. So
right. Yeah,
when we're like, it starts to cost money, but when we're talking about MVPs and how to get in with as few barriers to entry,
yeah,
$12 a month is that's dreamland for most entrepreneurs. So we
yeah,
we felt pretty good about that.
yeah, absolutely. And no install, no education curve,
Yeah,
really. Like it's been around long enough where I signed up for this email. Okay, we all know how to do that. It's like,
yeah,
honestly.
and exactly.
Um, I my I have two sons, older ones, probably a little bit younger than you, but not by much. And watching them go through the sort of millennial curve from email not part of their lives to that on ramp, I tend to put a peg on if someone goes the college route, they're going to get involved in email in the application process because every college I know of at least heavily back and forth on email, but it's just tough to stay completely off that channel, unlike many others.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting, we never thought about it, or at least I've never thought about it from that college age framework, but it's really like, we don't resonate. We're not a product that resonates massively with anyone under the age of 18. And we initially kind of ascribed that to, maybe it's like younger people aren't as interested in the news, which I'm sure there's some truth to that. But I think the bigger driver there is like, maybe email isn't necessary until you hit 18, until, if that's your route, you start applying for colleges, or you enter
Yeah.
the workforce. But
Yeah. Yeah.
once you get to a certain age, there's no way around it.
Yeah. And you just hit the other bit of it, right? If it's not the college route, if it's the work route, I would hazard a guess that many, if not most, job applications involve, and we need your email address,
Oh yeah, yeah, good point.
right? And it's not a cost to get one. So that's taken out of the way as well. And as you said, first client or ubiquitous client available on anything is an email client. I mean, the first wave of mobile pre-smartphone. So now I'm dating myself. BlackBerry era, right? Email was the killer app for
Yep.
that first wave of things that did more than voice calls. And I still miss the BlackBerry keyboard. Like, I could type fast with two thumbs on that bad boy, right? But it was good old email. Yeah, fascinating. Let's switch gears and talk a bit about the fundamental journalistic aims of 1440, because that's a very important and a very not simple target to shoot at.
Yeah, and I'll kind of preface all of this by saying that I'm lucky enough to have an incredibly talented co-founder and editor in chief. His name's Drew. He's got a PhD in material science and spent roughly a decade working on Capitol Hill. His job was actually to try and translate scientific documents
Oh,
to
wow.
core members of the House, so
Yeah.
they could understand what was happening in the science world in plain English.
Yeah.
So it just, this incredible role that core to it was distilling complex topics into English that anyone could understand.
Yeah.
So what he does basically, and we now have an editorial team to support him, but what he and his team do on a daily basis is take this ever changing, ever evolving, and like incredibly noisy news landscape, and decide what are the most important stories across verticals, and what's most impactful to the average person. We lean heavily on facts and data, and we're incredibly biased people. Everyone's biased, but our goal is to remove any editorial, any charged language, and just tell people on all sides of the aisle, regardless of your political or apolitical, what's happening in the world. And what I will say is, it sounds a little hand wavy. It's very hard to define the process, and I don't take part in this process on a daily basis, but our data is really compelling in kind of how that apolitical or unbiased approach manifests itself. So we actually have a third of our audience is Republican, a third is Democrat, a third is independent. 10% of the audience is far left, 10% of the audience is far right. So we see this incredible data that I can't think of another news source that has 10% on the far left and 10% on the far right. And it very closely mirrors Pew data for political affiliation in the US.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how the cookie crumbled with our editorial approach, and how we're talking to our readers on a daily basis.
So, when you mentioned the heavy reliance, that's wonderful, by the way. It really is. Kudos to you guys. It's a very important thing to do. The reliance on data puts a cost burden on what you do. Fact checking isn't free. I know it's fast, but it's not free. Did you plan on that in advance, business model wise?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, we did not. But we now have a professional fact checker on our team. It's just a role that we have on board in house. We also have a professional copy editor who comes from the publishing space, and she's doing some level of fact checking as well every day. And I would also hazard a guess I could be wrong here, and I'm worried I might misspeak, but we have we have more eyes on our newsletter before it goes out every day than I think any other publisher in the space. It goes through between writers, copy editors, and then writers who are also doing copy editing work, and our editor in chief and our content officer. We have like roughly 10 pairs of eyes on the newsletter every day before we send it, and that's for every single section, day in, day out. And I think that there is time burden, there's cost burden there, but if we're only as good as our product. If we lose trust with our readers because they don't, we have too many factual inaccuracies, or because we have too many typos, even because typos degrade trust in some way or another. Then we lose the business, we lose the product. So, or I guess, flipped, lose the product, lose the business. But that's, so I mean, we really need to prioritize that now. We kind of, as co-founders and early employees, we spent a lot of time on fact checking in the early days, but now we brought on more people. So that's always prioritized.
Yeah. I had a long conversation yesterday with a new guest on the show, my new buddy, Jen Capstraw, who's worked in the email space for a long time, but interestingly enough, she had started in journalism.
Oh, interesting.
And more or less, I don't want to put words in Jen's mouth, but more or less hit the point in I think the 90s of saying, wait a minute, journalism is doing this really uncomfortable, like just split and schism. And I don't think it matched why she had gone into the field. That was my interpretation of what she had to say. And certainly I've seen it live through it as well. And it is a vital mission. I'll just bring this in as a point of comparison and then steal some of his stuff as a takeoff point. There's a newsletter that I pay to subscribe to, written by one guy, Ben Thompson. Newsletter's called Stratechery. Like I read it every morning. Like if Ben has something to say that day, I sit down and read. It's frequently very long. He's open about having his own biases and opinions, but he's like writing a really complex book in public, and it's freaking awesome to listen to and watch. And the economics I'm suspecting work really well for him. He's got a pretty good subscriber base. And he's talked at times, more than a few times, about, sort of his business email newsletter in contrast with the business model that was the newspaper. And I'll paraphrase Ben a little bit. He said, newspapers, when that was a really flourishing form, essentially had a localized monopoly on printing presses. That news became the thing that got printed, but it was an advertising business really driven by that localized monopoly on printing presses and trucks. You don't have that problem.
No.
But arguably the Washington Post, New York Times, pick it, Wall Street Journal, whoever, you could say shouldn't have that problem as well. And I don't see anyone doing it exactly the way you guys are doing it. And why not?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I also, to kind of sidestep here a little bit, I think the, if I remember correctly, I need to just brush up on my facts a little bit more. But if I remember correctly, if you look at subscriptions for New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, I think print subscriptions are down for every publisher except for New York Times in the past year. So you do see this. It's likely not a distribution issue. It's likely a shift from print to digital. But you are seeing this kind of mass exodus away from print and into digital. Which is interesting. Just an interesting trend. Period. Kind of speaks to the importance of newsletters, or maybe in the case of New York Times, their app is massively profitable. So there are different approaches here, but I obviously can speak to the newsletter space a little bit better, and am very bullish on emails. But yeah, I do think a lot of folks have taken different approaches to this email space. Are they highly niche products about crypto as an example, or their newsletters, excellent newsletters, in fact, about alternative assets, and excellent newsletters about, what's a good example? Kind of how both sides are talking about a single political issue 3 times a week. Just great products out there. And when we got into this space, we saw this this verticalization of the newsletter space, at least, and also the news space at large. It was very, very fragmented. Everything was inch deep or inch wide, mile deep. Everything was going very deep on individual topics.
Yeah.
We thought, why is no one up here? Why is no one doing the mile wide, inch deep approach? So when we got in, it wasn't happening so much. I think folks have come and gone within this mile wide, inch deep space.
Yeah.
But we were early entrants, which was fortunate for us. But also, I think, like, I can't speak highly enough about the product itself. It's something that you can't just decide to build a mile wide, inch deep, unbiased newsletter. You have to come to it with expertise and with an excellent product. And that's what our editorial team, and specifically our editor in chief, brings to the table.
I'm stoked because having you on the schedule, and of course trying to learn a bit about you. It's like, why did I not know about this? Signed up immediately, right? Because I honestly I've been looking for mile wide, inch deep, fact based, because it just teased me off. I'm your ideal customer. Teased me off to go cherry pick all over the place and then try and stick a bias filter on all of them and sort out some actual nuggets of truth. It's a very difficult job to do, and asking millions of people to do it themselves, it's a big lift, right?
Yeah, and
It's a big lift.
there are plenty of news junkies out there, and that's awesome. Like people who are really, really invested in what's happening in the world. We're not gonna win with those people. They will do the exercise where they're kind of going down into every vertical and really, really learning about it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that mindset, but I think for the average American, it's just not a sustainable exercise.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've said a couple of times American. Sounds like for the moment, at least, that's the specific aim scope of the business. Yes,
it is. Yeah. So we have, I think, 98.5% in that ballpark of our readers are US based.
Okay.
We do have some Canadian readers.
Sure.
Brazilian, German, UK pops up a lot in our analytics.
Yeah.
But the lion's share is American. I think it's probably because we cover a lot that's close to our hearts. So
yeah.
We'll talk a lot about US politics. We'll talk a lot about US scientific discoveries and culture moments. And we do the international, but the focus is really what's impactful to the average American.
Right. To this country. And that also lets you narrow down and for now, at least, do English, I assume, probably not other languages yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, that's got its own set of challenges, I'm sure. At the same time, we're at an interesting moment to have this discussion, because if we had this conversation a month ago, I'd have said, well, the interesting thing about email is the vehicle is it's almost global. I mean, to a great extent, email is not used much in China, but you could, a month ago, send an email to most other countries. Now we're living in this instant where if you had someone in Russia reading your newsletter, they probably don't have access right now, or they maybe don't have access, and we don't really know.
It's a good point. There are, I think, a lot of the upside, I should say, of us focusing on this US audience is we're intimately familiar with the legislation, the goings on, just the general state of affairs, status quo in the US.
Yeah.
I mean, even like looking at GDPR in Europe, it's we're totally GDPR compliant. It's not the hardest thing in the world to do, but it does add a layer of complexity to anything we do. So if we had a huge portion of our audience in Europe, we'd be concerned that any big legislative changes could impact our business.
Yeah. It's not complex to do, but it adds a little bit of cost and friction, and it also adds an element of risk.
Yeah.
Right. That if you mess up, you're like, there's a fellow I've had as a guest on this, a friend of mine, Dennis Damon, is he's one of the better known email privacy space guys. And he always kind of shakes his head about just how complex it is to get it right.
Yeah.
So by staying focused, where we've got, we're starting to get some laws, the CCPA passing in California. Like we're starting to say, maybe we need to be a little beyond canned spam in the US, but we're not there yet. And I suspect you'll be fine for whatever we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And our goal is always just to be to be compliant to the most rigorous level
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
with any California legislation, that becomes, in our eyes, American legislation. So
Yeah.
it's that part is straightforward enough for us that
Yeah.
we make the change, and we know the change is happening. It's national news. When we start layering in like, oh, we have to make this like such and such tweak for Europe and such tweak for China, and then one for Southern Africa and one for South America, just becomes immensely complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does. And we still don't know who owns that token, the email address. I would argue it's a funny little beast because you look at the language. You get someone to talk about email, and there's personal possessives all over the place. My inbox, my email. I get my email on my device. Da, 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 da. Okay,
Mhm.
and I gave you permission to communicate with me, so my email becomes a proxy for my person. At the same time, you've got that. You've now got my email address in a record somewhere at 1440 because I said yes, you can. So now we've got this shared shared possession of the thing, and you get to use it to send me stuff. And we're still batting. We're still trying to figure out the boundaries of that puppy. And I don't think we're anywhere near done figuring out the best approach, right approach for different countries, for different people, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be just such complicated legislation to write or even think about. I don't envy the people that that are tasked with that.
Yeah.
What I will say, kind of in favor of our strategy towards someone who we want to respect, who has given us access to their inbox
Mhm.
in whatever level of ownership where like we think is the proper level of ownership. But we actually we have like very advanced filtering functions in our daily send to make sure that we're only emailing people who love us. Basically, we think that there are so many ways you can make the life worse of someone if you spam them all the time. And you also make life worse for you as a business person
Mhm.
if people are marking spam on your newsletter, unsubscribing all the time, or if they stop opening and then they teach their inbox, they teach Gmail that you're not a reputable sender. So we make sure that after someone stops opening for 30 days, we stop sending to them. It's what's allowed us to maintain an open rate that exceeds 50% every day. It's what has allowed us to have a click-through rate that's in the 20 to 25% range every day. We know that people's inboxes are precious. It's like, but to this entire conversation, just about everyone has email.
Yeah.
It's a super important medium.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing worse than opening your inbox for a day and seeing like layers upon layers of spam. So we want to be cognizant of that.
So you opened the door to a technical side topic that I thought we might end up kicking around a little bit, which is that Apple's move with mail privacy protection has to have thrown a monkey wrench in that measure.
We think it's, yeah, I mean, high level, absolutely. We think it's an interesting play for the industry, and I could talk about it for hours. So I'll spare you on kind of my tinfoil hat theories, but at a high level, it's inflating open rates across the space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just for listeners to quickly recap, anyone who opts into Apple Mail Privacy automatically registers as an open every day that you send an email to them at a high level.
Yep.
So we've seen this kind of inflate open rates across the space, make it more difficult to track kind of who's opening or who isn't. We were lucky enough that our open rate was 52% before Apple Mail Privacy launched, and now it's 57%, 58% on a given day.
Yeah.
So we're able to we have tools as well that kind of isolate the penetration of Apple Mail Privacy within our list, and it is very small for now.
Yeah.
But it makes tracking more difficult.
Yeah.
I think the entire space is going to move to clicks as a point of record. Just how many people are clicking on your content, because then you can't forge a click. Basically, you can now forge an open.
True. Let me put two pieces on that conversational table though. One, the goal you'd mentioned earlier of 30 days never opens
Mm-hmm.
becomes arguably almost impossible to measure for those MPP opted in folks, which is uh, those of us in the email space, and I'll put myself there as well, are like, Apple, do you know you actually are going to degrade the email experience with this move? Rah. Leave that one. Leave that one aside for a second. Let me see if I can recover the the second thought I had. Clicks. Yeah, I just did a talk about clicks this morning with a bunch of folks in the email space. The core of 1440, the core value, I should say, I can get without clicking. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. Yeah.
Okay. So, and I love that because that puts your business in the camp as folks in the email and email marketing space, especially, have been grappling with, opens and clicks opens just got changed. Thanks, Apple. Nice curveball. There's a tendency to think in terms of click-driven businesses like e-commerce.
Mhm.
And I've been one of those who always sticks up my hand and says, hang on a second. There are businesses where the thing in the inbox is the product or the service, and me reading it is the engagement and the business equation that we're after. I'll usually bring up Stratechery as my example because I've been reading it for a good long stretch. But clicks they're a proxy, but the numbers are so much smaller. And I'm assuming you don't want to, and I'll use the word intentionally, you don't want to introduce clickbait just to have that measure.
Yeah. And absolutely, totally agree. It introduces a lot of slippery slopes. And I won't pull up your first thread too hard, but I will say I completely agree. We worry, and a theory that I have is 2022 will be the year that Americans and people in general get much more frustrated by spam in their inboxes, because your average marketing manager at a big e-com company isn't going to have that open segmentation that they once did. So I totally agree with you, but I won't pull too hard on that thread. So we're seeing that as iOS or as Apple mail privacy begins to penetrate more and more, we're moving to clicks as our point of record. And it's a much smaller portion, but it is 25% of our daily opens.
Okay,
we have a daily level of communication with our readers. So you find that over time, I think we might have to move to a 90-day window instead of a 30-day.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I might have to extend that that time period a little longer.
Yeah.
We do see that the slippage we're going to have of people who were opening but never clicking over a 90-day window is incredibly small. It's like maybe we'll lose 1%, which is still big numbers. We don't like to lose whatever that is, 14,000 people, and that's not fun, but it's much less dire than if we were losing 100,000 people.
Yeah. There's a tech company called Litmus. You're probably familiar with them in the email space. And I've been on their list for a long time, read a lot of their content. They sent out an email to the Litmus list in circa January, and they took the bold move of saying, click on this if you want to keep hearing from us. And I love that. And that's the kind of thing that you guys could really viably do. Like, we don't know if you're opening or not, click the big red button because we'd like to know that you want to keep getting this. And I doubt that you'd lose anybody. Marketers, and I suspect even more bad actor type spammers, would never put a button like that in their content. Never. Yeah. So you've got some places to go, but it does change that flow a little bit, that friction free. We'll just keep it on and try and do the best thing that was available for 20 odd years. That's now become, there are rumors, unconfirmed at this point. There are rumors of Google getting more aggressive about prefetching with their image proxy, which would have somewhat the same effect. So I don't think we're done with this shift yet either. So,
I suspect, Gmail, Yahoo. I totally agree. I don't think we're done. I think clicks have legs. I think maybe even they will be removed as the point of record after another iteration of of privacy measures, but I see that as more difficult to accomplish. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm comfortable making that shift to clicks and then just seeing what happens, rolling with the punches.
Well, and back to the root of this conversation about, email as a sort of a first party, one-to-one channel. I said you could email me. I agree that clicks are maybe the next thing up for a real privacy look. So I actually I wrote a blog post for Only Influencers just to shake everyone's tree a little bit. Honestly, I said, okay, I'll give you some live technical examples of a click resulting not in your browser opening, but in a cloud-based browser with no PII opening. Clicks in the sense that an ecom guy means them could very well change dramatically. But first party email relationship, we've got a mechanism to handle that, right? If I attach anonymous customer ID, even if it's a private session browser, I'll still know it was you that clicked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we've got some places to go. Requires very tight data hygiene, data maintenance, data control. Like you got to have your house in order to do that, which at your scale is no mean feat.
Yeah. I mean, we're grateful for awesome tools that can kind of figure that out for us.
Yeah.
That we trust, frankly. It all comes down to trust for us. So
Yeah.
We see that the data is sufficiently reliable to a high enough level that the tool of choice for us, our email sending platform is Campaign Monitor, and they're able to help us with that tracking.
Wow, I'm delighted to hear that. I've read a lot of their material as well. That's a terrific company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And they're handling that kind of scale. That is exceptionally good. In the daily, and I assume that that's the main thing right now is the daily news from 1440, right?
That's fair.
Meaning is conveyed with words. Fair summary?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Meaning is conveyed with words.
On in the content of the daily? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No visuals yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
We toyed with it. I should say not currently, actually. So we toyed with it in early iterations when we were MVPing the product.
Yeah.
And actually, I have theories for why this might be the case, but we saw lower open rates and lower click-through rates over time when we included visuals versus when we removed them. I think part of it is higher HTML load to a certain extent. So we were missing spam, or we were maybe being put in spam or promotions at a slightly higher rate with some inboxes. But another piece of it, I think, is we try to convey all meaning with words, and it's a self-contained newsletter. You can go out and learn more, which is why we have such a high click-through rate as well. But I very rarely, as a consumer of 1440, I very rarely click on anything because I read the newsletter and I get everything I need to know, and then I'm off on my day.
Right. Where I was driving with that, apart from being a visual communication geek, and email is not necessarily the best vehicle for that. I think we'd probably agree. With a data-centric business, you hit, I would argue, quite quickly, you hit a boundary about the data itself. Like you have to simplify and arguably you have to interpret to take complex data set and put it in English.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. If someone, the read more link may have the table, the chart, the pivot table or whatever the heck it is, go there, go there if you want to consume that. By contrast, just for fun, intellectual fun. You look at the discipline, I would argue probably the best in the business, the discipline the New York Times has evolved in visual journalism, in data journalism, and it's exceptional. And there are times that I learn and understand things from the work they've done to put data in visual form that I couldn't have gotten, no matter how well written, out of language. Email's a crap vehicle for that. Like for a lot of reasons, it could be better, but it's not what it's wired for, right?
Yeah, and some are really good at it. Even though I do agree, email is not the ideal medium for that, but some do an exceptional job. There's a newsletter that I know. It's called Charter that just excels in graphs. It's all data viz, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so much fun. It's like candy. Like
Yes.
and they excel at visual communication in the email format. So there are places out there that can do it. I think it comes back to a certain extent to our reason to be is not to
Yeah.
and there are times when a visual, when like an excellent infograph could further understanding on complex topics,
Hmm.
but our general reason to be is not to provide data visualization or
Yeah.
greater visual context on certain events or certain
Yeah.
things happening in
Yeah.
the world. It's more to give this like high level view. And we do like to lean on facts and data, and data viz is a great way of consuming data. Like not everyone loves like a good old fashioned Excel spreadsheet like I do. So it's it's there's nuance to it, but I think it's not really our core. It's not our core competency. It's not where
Yeah.
as individuals have this incredible skill set. Like it's not who we are. So
Yeah.
I think some do it really well. New York Times is a good example. Charter is another good example, but I don't think we're going to win there personally. It's
Right.
too non-native and too difficult for us as producers of 1440.
It would also, if you tried to do much of that, you'd have a cadence challenge. And by cadence, I mean today's news may lend itself to, info visualization. Tomorrow's news, there may be, nothing that
Yeah.
fits that. So I'd end up with this kind of, wait a minute. Ben Thompson, who I mentioned before, I think he's doing less of this, honestly. He used to have, I thought, quite clever, quite informative, very simple graphics that he drew himself. I'm pretty sure on an iPad with the paper app. But
But
frequently he'd summarize a complex view of strategy with stick figures and graphs on paper and pop it in his newsletter. And I saved any number of those. I'm like, that's it. Like that actually tells the story right there. But he's drifted to a lot more language. I just realized that. Interesting. Yeah, that I and sticking to your, sticking to your thing is a very good move, right? And the temptation to drift and try and become all things to all people, I don't think would serve you well. Plus, we do skim and scan so well that the language centric summary of the news, meets us where we are now. I think to a great extent.
yeah, agreed. And you make a really interesting point about cadence and just consistency in general. Is like, yeah, if we started introducing infographics, we'd have to do so regularly, I think, and
Yeah,
something
be part of your style too.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying it won't happen. Anything could evolve that way, but
sure.
if we do so, it's either got to be like an every Friday thing or a every Saturday or every other.
Yeah,
Like it
yeah,
needs some level of consistency. Because something we hear often from our readers is they love how they know where everything in the newsletter is.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
If they want to skip to science and technology because they love the science news, they know exactly how far to go down, and they'll find
Right.
it immediately. If we
Nice.
introduce every other day infographics, it just
Yeah,
gets and I'm like kind of scapegoating infographics here, but anything that doesn't fall every day is
yeah,
you lose that consistency and you lose some readers, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you picked your arrangement and your buckets, so to speak. So that I'm guessing there's always something in the science and tech. There's always something.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Um, where do you see the business being different, let's say a year from now? More
Yeah.
people, obviously.
You stole my first answer. Yeah, but something that I think we've done really well to date is just maintain focus. I think it's really easy to chase shiny objects or try maybe like a science newsletter or a UK edition or anything in between.
Mhm.
And we've always said focus on this core newsletter. If we grow this 5%, the thing gets pretty crazy. Or if we grow it 5% monthly, let's say.
Yeah, it's
So
big. Yeah.
a year from now, I'd love to be at how does the math work out there? I'd love to be at say 2.5 million subscribers,
Yeah.
maybe higher. I'd love to continue this pretty rapid growth. And then aside from that lame answer that I just gave you, we'd love to kind of explore different medium types that our readers are actually asking for. It's really easy to go to certain things that we think our readers want, but we actually see in the data when people are engaging with certain content. They love, for example, 101s. So if we talk about CRISPR in the newsletter and we say, kind of understand what CRISPR is, but not really, we'll actually link to a 101 to CRISPR so that our readers can like better understand what that topic is referring to.
Right.
So that we aren't just like dropping buzzwords like there's no tomorrow. So we have these, we linked externally to these 101s currently, but we think there's a world where we can create kind of an internal platform where we're sharing and saving and discussing on topics that are really nuanced that not everyone understands, but everyone's heard of. So that's kind of the seismic shift that might happen in the next year or so. But you can rest assured we'll stay focused on the newsletter regardless of which kind of shiny objects we do chase.
That's terrific. I mean, tantalizing future possibility, but the ruthless focus the ruthless focus on doing what you're doing is terrific as well. And I suspect with compound interest, pun intended, you bid fair to hit that 2.5 million and maybe then some.
Yeah, I hope that's a conservative guess, but we'll see.
Yeah. It's kind of fun to watch. Yeah. Wow. Cool. Well, we're closing in on well over 45 minutes, so I think I'll wrap up. But what an enjoyable conversation! Congratulations, you guys have really built something.
Yeah, appreciate that. Right back at you. This is a lot of fun. Love jamming that email, and it's cool to talk to an expert like yourself.
Well, hey, wrapping. Don't jump here. We'll chat with you afterwards. But my guest has been Pierre Lipton, co-founder, COO at 1440 Media. Where does someone go if they're interested?
Join1440.com. That's join1440.com. And it's a totally free newsletter. We hope you'll join in.
There you go. We'll end on that one. Thanks, Pierre.
Awesome. Thank you.